we're also in this dichotomy where Donald Trump is like trying to have a really strong face for the United States people, while at the same time, China is also they don't just want to back down. And I think from all the social medias, it's really funny how everybody's kind of viewing both as like clowns in a way, or like one has to win over the other. No, like they both have to win. Like if that's like the best case scenario.
All right, we're on. And we're talking about tariffs this week, and we started seeing it as an interesting subject because, well, tariffs were here and then they weren't. We given a 90-day pause. We're trying to see if China would would kind of renegotiate, but they're not. They're both trying to argue of who should lower their tariffs first. It's kind of like a chicken battle and see who backs out first. And the reason that it was so interesting to me is, how we talked about tariffs before, and we said that the whole point of this tariff situation was that we wanted other countries to come and negotiate and to talk with Trump and see how we could kind of get this going.
Mm-hmm.
In that kind of aspect, for me, if you ask me, it kind of worked because we've had other countries who negotiated and who talked to Trump about how we could lower tariffs for everyone. And then I've had several reports, several articles in Southeast Asia that talk about, hey, these embassies, these politicians are going to Trump to renegotiate and to talk how we can make a better win-win situation, a more free trade situation for everyone. And let's get it clear, free trade for me, when I define it, is zero tariffs on everyone. We haven't had that for a long time. Tariffs have been in place for quite a while. The actual free trade, where no one charges anything, or no one tax for imported goods or services, that's going to be something that's interesting to see, and it would overall make it cheaper for everyone. Trump's role right now is he's having people suffer and pay the price in the short term so that we can enjoy the benefits in the long term, or hopefully for the long term. And it really takes a lot of going through. I'm hearing a lot of controversy from people in the States as well, saying, oh, this is the dumbest thing ever. And I agree, it's not the most comfortable thing to have everything become more expensive. But
Yeah,
I'm interested in how other countries
I
like the
mean,
Philippines are reacting.
I think we gotta at least set an idea that tariffs are actually bad. From an economic point of view, tariffs hurt both the country creating that tariff and the countries that are exporting their stuff inside that country.
Right.
So tariffs are bad. Let's just get that out of the way first and foremost. And it actually hurts the country as well as countries exporting um, those goods and services, like from in that country that has all those tariffs. So with that said, with the assumption that the tariffs are there to help create that negotiating tactic, like what you were saying, Chris, I think like it has brought in a lot of countries, kind of spooked them and made them realize how one person, like as from a trade uh, economic standpoint, it's kind of scary and kind of not good for the whole world that one
Mhm.
person can just make this change happen like crazily
Right.
without really much recourse. So first and foremost, we just got to establish that tariffs are bad, and the fact that President Donald J. Trump does have this power, it's surprising. It's kind of alarming, if anything. However, the idea that yeah, like in terms of the United States with other countries and their trade deficits,
Right.
it's kind of it's better for the country now with all these new renegotiations. And with that said, like primarily there's only one other country that is not let's say, bowing down to the United States tariffs, which is
Oh
China.
yeah.
So I think we gotta like make sure that uh there's an idea of like there's the United States and China. Primarily, these are the big two.
Mm,
In the United States, something really interesting about them is the United States has about, let's say, a population of 340 million people.
yeah.
Yet the country itself is responsible for 30 to 33% of all consumer goods
Sheesh.
in the whole world. So imagine, so there's like 7 billion people, and only 340 million are responsible for over 33% of consumer goods of the world.
I just looked it up for reference. The United States, your population is 4.22% of the world, but your consumer
4.2%.
is
So I just kind of want to get it out there that being in the United States as a general rule makes you in the top 1% of the world. Of
mm,
the world. So it is a great privilege to be here. And there's a reason why there's so many people that want to immigrate to the United States. So with that in mind, uh, because it's such a global force of economic, there's so much disposable income, let's say, in the
right.
United States compared to everywhere else. China is the biggest exporter of the world, and so they primarily try to focus with the United States because like they're the biggest crop, let's say. But with this trade war, everything's gonna cost more, and there's gonna be less and less, let's say, manufacturers, like the supply chain, less and less people
Mm,
that would want to buy from Chinese goods. And so what's gonna start happening is, although things are gonna be a lot more expensive in the United States, the ones that are hurting the most are the Chinese people, to be honest, because now
mm,
that they have all this supply, all this inventory, how are they gonna, like sell this inventory that they already have? If they can't really sell it to the United States with like 245% tariffs, it's going higher and higher every day.
mm,
Uh, they could potentially sell it to Europe, but then Europe is like maybe a tenth of what the United States can buy. And
right.
so they are in this, like they're at a certain odds with the whole world as well, because like they have so much stuff that they want to sell, but then they can't really have a great margin on it.
Mm,
And what's happening in China is they have all these factories that are already full, but then no one else is buying. So more and more businesses there are getting impacted, more so than the United States. Although this tariff war is bad as a whole, it is worse for one side than the other. And to me, it just seems like that China is going to lose a lot more the longer this thing goes.
like there's a
I
lot
mean,
more at stake for China.
yes,
For
and
it,
in
yeah.
particular, I think what's going to happen is, I mean, the people of China, there's only so much that they can only like tolerate. It kind of
Mm,
just reminds me of what happened in Germany. So there's the Iron Curtain between East Germany and West Germany, one with
right.
capitalism, one without. And what happened was that the East Germany like got a little taste of what was happening in the West, like televisions, for example. So they
Oh,
got a little bit of that capitalistic taste of like all these goods that are like much better than what they were having there. And then that dissatisfaction eventually kind of helped this Iron Curtain uh, kind of be withdrawn. And so I'm
mm,
thinking what's going to happen from what history kind of has been telling me is that the Chinese people are going to get really fed up about this tariff war, and they're going to be more so frustrated with Xi Jinping than, I mean, than the United States people getting more frustrated with Donald J. Trump. I
right.
mean, there's like a for sure 4 years of Donald J. Trump. The Chinese people, they're gonna have this president like for who knows how long, and he's only gonna be president for as long as the people kind of allow him to be president. And from what all the rebellions have been, it's always been rich people against rich people, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not just Xi Jinping there. Like, there's other people there of higher status, higher class, that their businesses are being affected greatly. And then at a longer amount of time, there's going to probably be some sort of coalitions that they're frustrated with how their country is being run. And then eventually, like, somebody has to give way. And we're also in this dichotomy where Donald Trump is like trying to have a really strong face for the United States people, while at the same time, China is also, they don't just want to back down. And I think from all the social medias, it's really funny how everybody's kind of viewing both as like clowns in a way, or like one has to win over the other. No, like they both have to win. Like if that's like the best case scenario, because for China's side, like he can't just appease Trump. They need to have some sort of win, or it's not going to be good for their leadership in the long run. And Donald J. Trump
Right.
has to win, or else like all the things that he said so far has just been a farce. Is like there's no water, and he needs that leverage for the next, like, really realistically, he needs that leverage for the next 2 years. After 2 years, whatever he's gonna say can't really hold up, because he can't realistically.
He won't be able to fulfill it, or like,
he's not
yeah.
gonna run for a third term. And so what's
I'd be
happening
surprised
now
if he
is
did.
I mean, there's been talks about it. I think that's what makes him a very like, you can't really react to what he's doing, because he's so good at negotiating. It's like you'd expect him, like there's like certain rules in the table, and he kind of just like table flips those rules. So that's what makes him good and like unpredictable. That's the word. And so we'll see how it goes. And honestly, it's almost like two companies trying to battle it out like for the bottom. And then how they say is like, who can hold their breath the longest would win. And in this case, the United States, I think, as annoying as it is that, like maybe there's those Chanel bags is going to be 3 times more, or like certain prices are going to be like a little bit more.
Right.
That level of annoyance is different from the level of annoyance that the Chinese people will experience, because this is their livelihoods. Like, if no one's willing to buy your stuff, you're just doomed. While in the United States, things are going to cost more, but they still have options in where they can buy. If anything, like Vietnam, Taiwan, like other places like that could probably export their stuff as well. And so, I mean, that is a long way to say, like, in the end, I think eventually this trade war is going to end, but then it's going to probably be more favorable towards the United States. And I think it's also, why doesn't people want that? I think there is a very obvious thing that's been happening in China, right? That there's a lot of IP, a lot of stealing from companies. And this is what makes a lot of companies that go to China kind of weary about it, and they get a little bit frustrated. Because in the United States, there's IP laws, there's laws that protects your company, what they do. Right. And, like if a company feels slighted from Europe, they could take their courts in the United States, and it can be valid. But the same can be true if something is happening in China. And I think it's very obvious where there's a lot of items there that are fake, or it's like, like the Nike shoes, right? It's not Nike, it's Mikey or something. It's not Jordans, like, with the logo of Jordan, it's like somebody else. It's very obvious, what's happening there. But then what can you do from a company outside of China? You have no recourse. I think this is very strong stance to try to make everything as fair as possible. I think a lot of countries should be rooting for the United States to win this kind of trade war. And that does kind of put them in a more precarious state, because like one country can do this. But I think as a general rule, very biased to me, but like the United States has kind of used that power to more or less guide things in a better path. Um, in that, like, when they had the power of two nuclear bombs, they're not bombing everything.
Yeah. Well, they keep threatening each other, and they're trying to see, who's going to step down first. And what I'm really seeing, and for me, like I honestly, for me, I really don't care much about the politics of it and the power play of it. I mean, I do care in some sense, but the thing that I'm focused on more is who's going to win. What's this going to affect the people monetary wise? Because again, we have some. Well, for some people, they have some investments in the United States. They're predicting that this is going to lead into some sort of recession. In fact, I was reading a report yesterday from JP Morgan saying that
Yeah.
we're seeing that the effects of these tariffs will take place in around 6 months and so, and that is around the same. That affects, prices are very very sticky. They tend to take a while before they have an effect, and the fact that we're delaying these tariffs play just kind of delays Armageddon. It might be earlier in some sense because our tariffs in China is still there. It's still existent. I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing for those living in Southeast Asia, Indochina, and the surrounding area nearby China, because, well, for one, if your biggest customer is no longer buying, then you want to try and sell to other customers, and to get rid of your inventory, like you said, they'd have to sell it at a discount. I don't think a lot of people know about this, but during COVID, when we've had that logistics problem and they've had an export problem, everything was more expensive. They sold everything at a discount to everyone else. And the Philippines, I saw the Philippines was a beneficiary of that as well. This is the thing I don't like about how the Philippines is reacting, and this is why I kind of don't like President Duterte, and also kind of like him. I like that he has a strong stance and he firmly believes in things, but in an economic sense, he wasn't exactly doing um, what was theoretically best, because he was the one who put the tariffs on the US first, and he was the one who kind of took a strong stance on trying to strengthen the production of Philippines and have the Philippines become dependent on its own resources. The problem for that is that the tendency for small countries is the less independent you are, the less trade you have going on, the worse off it is for you economically. If you look at the studies of, the sizes of country over the years, there's a correlation between a country's size and a country's land proportionate to how dependent they are on free trade. And the fact that we have tariffs right now, our tariffs on the US are 34%, and the US's tariffs on Philippines supposedly was around 17%.
Oh,
Wait
was
until
it based on the President Trump's like
it was
picture?
based on. So it's not on the it's not on the picture. It's
It's not.
based on
Okay.
Newsweek presented a chart. Frick. Philippines is charging tariffs at the US for 34%. And I think it's ridiculous. The Philippines is not using the tariffs as a power play
Mhm.
to try and throw back at other countries, like, you better minimize your tariffs on other Philippine goods, which I think is ridiculous. I don't think the Philippines contributes much to the world economy if you look at it aside from services we use. And to think that we would have that leverage where our tariffs on other countries are like 34%, and then with other countries it's like at 17%. The reason that these politicians put it is because they want the money it's a way of taxing, right? It's a way of government receiving
Oh.
funding.
Mhm.
Now, As to whether this money is really being used to develop the infrastructure and the development of the Filipino people, I really cannot say. It's, there's people in power who are always going to deny that, or say that it is. Other people would think otherwise, that it's not really being used for the people. And I think also that I think that the government is really trying to help in some sense, but that people just have an over an in unrealistically high expectation of how much the government should step in and help, because everyone wants it to be free. Everyone wants it to be, oh yeah, we want to have free healthcare, free education. No one talks about who's gonna hold the crap, who's gonna hold the bag of crap at the end. And yeah, it's just ridiculous to me that we have this high tariffs. But I'm hoping that everything would become, exports from China would initially become cheaper as they're trying to transition. I'm seeing news reports about manufacturers moving their facilities outside of China. There's a lot of
Mhm.
movement in Cambodia, in Malaysia, and in Vietnam. Not so much in Thailand. Last I checked, but we're seeing these factories moving, and they're moving at an incredible pace. They've started moving, actually. They didn't start moving when Trump announced the tariffs this year. They started moving when they found out that Trump was running for election and that he was going against Joe Biden. And
Mm.
then when Kamala stepped in, they were like, oh yeah, we're still going to move manufacturing.
Oh.
And yeah, and so they started getting serious about moving. But they've actually also had this China plus one policy where they were encouraging other countries to build, to free up land so that manufacturers could move as well. It's not This is not the first time that Chinese companies have been anticipating moving to other countries. This has been going on for quite a long time already, and it might become more expensive still. If not the tariffs, then definitely the labor for the goods, and also the uncertainty of trying to function in a country with different regulations from yours. So that's the talk of the town. That's the game that I'm seeing, with this tariffs play. I really think that it it will not be as bad as people would predict, but it's still
Mm.
gonna affect people. It's still gonna affect
I mean,
consumers in some sense.
of course. I think if you're a young person, I think this tariff war is actually pretty good for you. And that might be a hot take, to be honest. But I think if you're young and you don't have a lot of stuff in the market, like you know, even being part of the stock market, that's kind of a middle to upper class kind of like you have
Right.
the means to kind of do that. Even um, I think when a lot of the stocks are going to be going down, or there's a lot of this volatility, and not a lot of people really know what's going to happen. Like we're
Hmm.
more optimistic about it, but like in the absolute worst, this might be 6, 12, 18. It might take a couple of years, and everything, let's say, is going to be going down for those couple of years. That's the best time for a young person to really just to buy the dip, let's say. I think in the United States, only about like maybe 20-25% of people are actually in the stock market. So it kind of just shows like when the stocks goes up and down, really realistically, it's more than this, but like only about 20-25% of people are really having that effect. And it does affect others, in the long run. But
Hmm.
those are the people being affected more directly on it. And
Right.
so that's not really like that big, especially when a lot more people don't even have any stocks, right? And they're just trying to get by. They're just trying to get groceries and things like that. And I think in the United States side, um, with all these tariffs happening, the United States have had like about like 2 trillion plus other companies coming into the United States and like pledging to donate, not donate, pledging to move manufacturing and investing in the United States market, like 500
Mm.
billion from TSMC. Like I think Apple as well as like hundreds of billions of dollars.
What's your take on that? Do you think that in so one of Trump's purposes, right, was to move manufacturing to the U.S. Do you think that that's a good thing or a bad thing that these companies
So
are actually moving it,
so it won't ever be like back in the day in like 1960s, 50s,
like the
where
industrial age?
yeah, the
Yeah.
industrial age where most cars are coming from the United States.
All right.
Because let's be honest, a lot of Americans would not really want those jobs. To be perfectly honest, those are like factory jobs, and there people like as a general rule, I think not a lot of people would really want to do that. I
I
mean,
mean, it could
if
work.
but as a general rule, I really don't think so. From what I've seen and from the people kind of I know, that's not something that they'll do. Like maybe they'll do like computers or
Right.
programs, but not directly like what we see in China, where like maybe they put the socks in, or how the shirts are perfectly tailored. It's
All
like putting the shirts and doing all this.
right.
Yeah, they're not really gonna do that. Or making an iPhone and would their hands be crafty, like putting these things into a correct spots. That's not a job that I think a lot of Americans are really prepared for. Those are like more
Mhm.
manual, like laborious kind of jobs.
It's for the
But what's going to
immigrants, but
happen? What's going to happen,
please.
I believe, is like a lot more of those factories are going to be refreshed. In that, yeah, we're going to have those people for sure, but it's actually going
Mhm.
to be a transition because we're also living in this new AI, change in the world. And so I think what's actually going to happen is for like sure that's going to happen, but then years down the line, AI and more programming, more hands-off jobs will be more available. And so it's funny because like we're gonna require more people to do that job initially, but then after a
Right.
while, it's gonna be like Amazon. Amazon employs a bunch of people, but like
Mhm.
the robots that they had to like in their warehouses on what item is what, where, like I think it's gonna be vastly improved, similar to that way to these other factories, maybe making cars.
Right.
Um, TSMC is doing like chips. It's not gonna be like in the United States, like creating those like little bits. I think it's gonna be more of those programs. And then I think the end result would be a more automated factory in which long run, I think like maybe 15, 20 years, we're actually gonna have less workers. Um,
Mhm.
less workers because we don't need, that kind of manpower anymore. But at the same time, like life would be a lot easier and cheaper because of the AI, because of that level of productivity. So this is going to be kind of weird where I haven't really quite wrapped my head around it and how that's going to affect society as a whole. I mean, potentially there's the idea that we would have a universal income, like a monthly income,
Right.
because life is so good that maybe everybody gets some sort of like stipend. I mean, like, Donald Trump kind of talks about this as well, where if you just cut a lot of the fat of the things that you don't really need, um, and if you run it like a business, like there's gonna be a surplus. And so, like,
Mhm.
how is this actually gonna react with the world? I'm not sure about the world, but like in the United States, I can just see it where, especially with the AI revolution, like it's almost like the way we are living right now. At the moment, would we have those issues with housing, but then with more
Mhm.
of those factories, maybe like we can create a more manufactured housing at a faster and more robust rate, as well as I think with the fixing of the immigration issue. I mean, that just makes more supply out there, and so like rent will be cheaper in the long run, I think.
Right.
And
I think that you know I think that a lot of people underestimating the capabilities of Americans to do the work and the manual labor. So we do know that Americans, they prefer not to do these jobs, and you see it from generation after generation. They're expecting these white collar jobs, instead of these blue collar jobs. But what people don't see is that there are still these blue collar jobs. There are still people who's willing to do
Hmm.
them. And I think we're in the next couple of years, I'm expecting to see a surplus or like more people immigrating to the United States, more legal immigrants. If you really think about Trump's policies, he was going against illegal immigrants and was trying to get rid of that. Once you get rid of the illegal immigrant human capital, you're then able to increase the amount of legal immigrant capital.
Oh,
You're
yes.
allowed, yeah. And
Actually,
then
sorry. Yeah. Sorry, you can continue first.
yeah, and they're coming in, and they're coming in when they have legal immigrant status. It's harder for these companies to take advantage of your illegal immigrant status. Like for illegal immigrants, they're treated as non-human beings. If you're talking about
Hmm.
caring for these people, have them come in legally, so that they don't have another enemy to worry about, and that they have the US
Mm,
government backing them to making sure at least they maintain their human rights while working
of course.
in these industries.
But but you know what's interesting when you mentioned that is I don't even fault people coming into the United States illegally. Like as a Filipino immigrant,
Right.
family coming from the Philippines, like you have to kind of come in legally because it's even more annoying to kind of go another route. Like it's just not realistic. But I can completely understand from people, in particularly people of like in South America or Mexico, trying to get to the United States because there's just better opportunities. I don't fault those individuals because if I was in that situation, if I was in a, like my family was in that situation, it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. If you think that, crossing those deserts and in the end of that darkness, like in the light of it, there's going to be a better opportunity, even if it's not like legal per se, it's still better than what was before. So I don't fault those individuals trying to do that. Rather, I actually would fault, we got to have accountability for the companies that hired those illegal immigration immigrants. Like there has to be a level of accountability for those people, for those companies, because they're the ones that could treat those people like trash. They're the ones that could not pay the minimum wage. They're the ones that could
Right.
like really like you have to work or this or you'll be reported kind of thing. Like
Hmm.
they're in a really sticky situation. They have so much power over their workers in that sense.
I
So
mean,
those
again, yeah,
companies
like that's the
have
idealistic.
like they're the ones that are actually like, if anything, they're the ones promoting more illegal immigration because like the United States government has to hold those companies accountable. Because then what's going to happen after 4 years? What happens when Donald J. Trump is no longer president? And now
Right.
it's almost like the companies were just abiding their time. No, like I think they need to find whichever companies those are and actually hold them accountable because they were practically having slaves. And I don't think that's acceptable at this point in time anymore. And so we got to hold those companies accountable. And then when that is actually like for real in the minds of a lot of people, then
Hmm.
then the alternative is like, what is the other alternative? The alternative is you have to come in legally because even if you come in illegally, like there's not really that light of like having that kind of job from another company or whatever. As long as those companies, like we can't do anything about those individuals. Like the best we can do is try to impede them, try to make sure that
Right.
they don't come in, and then when they're caught, for sure deport them. But the ones that are actually more promoting it, I think that is like of a worse governmental sin, let's say, are those companies. And I think like if you
The
cut them from the root like that,
right.
more of those illegal immigration problems is going to become less and less. And I think this is going to be like broad from even like Canadians, let's say, if anyone's coming from the north. But
Well,
like it's just
you had a good point about saying that these companies were the cause for a lot of illegal immigration, and that it's really them taking advantage of illegal immigrants. The thing is, like, it's hard to I get the point that we ideally want to have these companies treat these immigrants with the right amount of to enforce their rights, and that some of these companies would try and limit or eliminate those rights by threatening to have them reported to the USCIS. And the thing I think this is still step one. I think not everyone's seeing this big picture yet with legal immigration. First and foremost of all, I think that's one of the purposes. The thing that makes it so hard, you have to tread very very carefully in how you enforce laws for companies, because that's also going to affect small businesses and
Yes.
medium-sized businesses as well. And so you're very, you have to be very very cautious about this, because at the same time we're trying to limit the abuse of these big companies, of big management corporations. Not
Hmm.
saying that all corporations are bad. There are some that are like literally good and they have good intentions and good procedures, but some of these people, some of these places are not. And so how do you kind of punish the bad without
Well,
punishing the good as well?
I think you just punish them if they've been accepting illegal immigrants to work for them. I think there's a certain level of due diligence that you as an employer have to do before you employ somebody. And in the United States, there's if you're like a contractor, 1099, W-4, there's different categories of what kind of employment you're doing. And so with that said, it's not actually that difficult, I think. I think it's just as simple as like, okay, who are these employers of yours? Like, are they, how are they getting paid? And I think this happens like all the time, right? Making sure like your employer makes sure that you as an employee is somebody that they can trust, that you don't have
Right,
anything
right.
bad in your
So
background. It's not like you have to go FBI mode or anything. It just becomes like, okay, let's say let's find a company that does a lot of like mowing lawns. It's like this is a company, okay, that does that. But then like let's say in their sheet, like let's say they're doing like 100 lawns every day, but then it only shows that they only have like 2 employees. Do they really only have 2 employees, or like let's say five? It's like the numbers just doesn't add up. It's like, okay, like so you must have had help, or like how are you guys receiving that help? And then that's how you kind of break it down, I think. And so once again, it just kind of encourages, hey, like, and it also makes sense for it makes sense for the company. It's like, why would I hire an American, let's say for $15 an hour, if I can get an illegal immigrant for five? Like, we have to see it from their point of view. It makes sense, but because they have no concept of the consequences, I think, of doing that, like of the real consequences of doing that. And so
okay.
like
So
so
when you give the example,
mhm.
you give the example of a company, right?
Yeah.
And vouch that we should make regulations and how it's easy. I still argue that it isn't that easy, because given, so say you have a company, right, that does illegal immigration and they pay them less than minimum wage, they don't give them the amount that they have. Well, now flip that. What if it's a really good company with really good management? They
Hmm.
pay their illegal immigrants minimum wage and they know that they're
Well,
illegal, and they give them like these rights. If you create
mhm.
a law that says you can't just have any illegal immigrants working at all, then what about these
Well,
good companies who are treating their employees like
but they're
fairly?
not. It's almost like it kind yeah, that argument reminds me of like an illegal immigrant has not broken any crimes. Hence the word illegal. The word illegal is in there. So in those companies, what if they're already breaking the crime of employing illegal immigrants? And I'm not being like not sympathetic for these people. Like, I understand, and I think, not that I'm necessarily promoting it, if you really put yourself in that shoes, like,
Mhm.
it makes sense. Why would you do that? Of course it makes sense. But as a country, you also, like, now to the flip side of it, for a country's point of view, like with boundaries, for like, why do you have to enforce those boundaries. Like, it makes sense because a nation cannot exist without that. So
Mhm.
the best course of action for both of those two groups conflict with one another, and that is unfortunate, but it is. And so with the companies as well, they have to kind of recognize that, um, like, although you might say, like, okay, they're good about these things, the fact that they're even hiring an illegal immigrants, maybe at mass, that in itself is already a crime. It's not like that in itself is a crime, but they treat them really well. It's like, okay, but then they can't get a 401k. They can't legally get all these government uh, benefits. Legally speaking, they cannot. And I think also there are a lot of illegal immigrants that have received benefits. So it's unfair for the citizens of that particular country to be paying in for people that are
Mm.
not. And it's not like, once again, I understand for an illegal immigrant to come to try to go to a better place to,
Right.
for their family. And that's like the best case scenarios. But what really is happening as well is like a bunch of, let's say, young males come to that country instead. It's like, so it's not like, and to be honest, it's not like a big family man going into there and like trying to provide for their family. No, it's a lot of opportunistic young males trying to do it. And it makes sense. There's a lot more money to be made.
Mm.
And like that trip is actually really freaking dangerous. Like 50+% of females that go through that freaking treacherous route from the south crossing that border, something bad happens to them. Okay, I don't want to
Mhm.
get too
Yeah.
into it, but like that happens. It's legit. And so, like, with that being said, with those companies, the fact that you can't just say like they're a good company because they at the bare minimum paid them 15, but like in cash, and then they don't also have those certain benefits. It's that power dynamic that's really
Mm.
not great. And you know what? If those companies want them, there's ways to go about them. I think the Philippines at one point is like one of our biggest exports are nurses, let's say. And so a lot of companies would, uh, what's the word? They would sponsor people coming from the Philippines and working in Italy or working in the United States.
Right.
Like, it exists. It already exists. So we don't have to needlessly complicate it where like what's a good company, what's bad. Just follow the dang laws, right? And you know what? Somebody might disagree with some of those laws, and that's completely fine. So let's change those laws, right?
I think there's a lot of complications to immigration has been such an issue. I mean, I do know that the answer, we've already tried this. The answer definitely is not open borders and just let all kinds of people in. I think that you really should go through a legal process. I'm hoping that, well, the thing with the US is that they're open to receiving these immigrants, but it's not necessarily a much easier process. And there's a lot of consideration. I don't know.
Hmm.
It's
I
just
mean,
like having
let's
all these
just
stuff come into the U.S. is trying to bring in all sorts of it's trying to bring all these kinds of peoples in, and then you have these tariffs that are in place, and then you also have these rules and regulations. There's also like the people who really don't want to be in the states, but then there's people worried about inflation, and then there's this war with like the White House with the
sure,
Fed.
yeah,
So
those problems legit exist, but I think we just got to break it down to its fundamental level, where uh, you can't have a country without borders. And then if a country is going to be, if you're going to come into a country, right, you're a
mhm,
guest in that country. So with that said, I really don't think you should be like protesting or
mhm,
this other crazy stuff that you could be doing. Like, there's levels to it, levels of accountability, I guess. And like technically the United States as the government can uh, can kind of deport you anytime they really want if you're not a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really to its digression. And I think for a country, right, if they're allowing you to be a guest or the potential to become a citizen down the line, doesn't it make sense that the country would want you to somehow be able to contribute to that country?
Right.
Like, it makes sense for that country. And a counter would be like, what? How would you argue to somebody who doesn't have those skills, who has a family that wants to go to the United States?
Mm-hmm.
I feel you. I'm very sympathetic to that. However, from a country's point of, like, from your point of view, I'm like, yeah, go for it. You should apply. You should do as much as you can to apply to make yourself. I mean, even maybe potentially like try to up talk yourself so you're greater than you are, so you can get to the United States. While at the same time, for that country, I'll be like, well, you want to make it as evident that the people coming in are going to be contributing to your country. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, that's how I see it. And to me, it just makes sense that the United States tries to get as the greatest talent pool as much as possible. And so this kind of goes back with like in terms of tariffs, like even in China, like if you could have the best manufacturing geniuses there, or like supply chain, and then they want to get to the United States, why would the United States say no, right? And it
Yeah,
kind of reminds
that's
me
why
of,
it has to. You have to bring these people, and that's why I said
yeah.
like there's going to be more immigrants coming in
And
legally,
that's
hopefully.
fine. That's fine. Yeah. And actually, this is a little bit of an uncomfortable truth to it. But like, where do you think some of the German scientists went? After World War II, like, it's
Oh.
not like it's not like they created NASA or anything, right? Like, it's like that level of talent. Like, it's not. I just trying to see the world in a realistic way. Those people, like, they're talented, right? You don't just push that talent to the void somewhere. You kind of want to use that talent for your own purposes. And that's been how it is for the longest time in the world. You just kind of, like, you have to have that like level of mindset, even though it can be a little uncomfortable and it might sound bad, but that's just how, like, life is. That's how companies try to steal employees from one another, try to get their better employees, things like that. That's how, like, a trade thing kind of works. And so as an individual, I think the best thing you can do like as an individual is try to get those talents, try to obtain those talents through other ways. Like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the internet now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, being bilingual is really cool. Like, it gives you a heads up here in the US. Trilingual, that's gonna be even better, and so forth, and so on and so forth. And so, I mean, there's a lot of these problems, like the tariffs. What can you do? But then, like, what can you do? Like, I don't really want necessarily the government to fix everything. If they can fix everything, they can ruin everything. Um, and more often than not, I think, like, as long as the government kind of makes everything as laissez-faire as possible. But in this case of, like, China and the United States, it hasn't been laissez-faire. Like I've been saying before, China has and once again, I want to reiterate this. When I mean China, I mean like the Chinese government, which is separate from the people itself.
Right.
But it's that idea that you have this great company, this great idea, and then China can just kind of copy that, maybe
Mm-hmm.
make their own company, make their own business, make that successful, and then, like, what can you do now? Like, you can't have a court in China because, like, it won't matter. It won't really do anything. I think so. I think in general, this is all about the fairness and what's going to happen. In the United States, there's going to be like a lot of stuff, but like with the immigration, I think they're in the right track on it. Tariffs, with my perspective on it, is eventually it's going to become free once the China thing's been dealt with and it's more favorable, or at least it's equal in the United States with other countries. And I think that's all anybody else really asks for. I think that just helps promotes more innovation, and innovation is going to help more people around the world.
I think about these two countries, and I'm really hoping that I I kind of despise it that we're not the Philippines is not an immediate beneficiary of. Well, it's a good and a bad thing. We're not the immediate beneficiary, but we're also not the immediate. We're not immediately in the crossfires of what happens between these two superpowers.
Well,
Maybe we are. Maybe we are. Maybe we aren't.
I mean, I think there will be is. I mean, from what I remember, the Philippines is kind of in tension with China because of
Right.
China creating like those islands, and then
Oh,
there's
they
like the
backed
fishing
out
tension.
when Trump came into power. They backed out because we have some U.S. bases in the Philippines,
Mhm.
and there was a strong iron fist from Trump saying like, "You better back out. You better stop this," and they stopped. Actually,
Okay, yeah, there you go. So like with that, I think when the world is a lot more free, and like this is something that you're not familiar with, but like the United States and the Panama Canal,
right?
like
Oh yeah,
the Panama Canal, that canal is actually very useful in terms of like cutting down the time for supply chain reasons, as well as in the Mediterranean Sea. There's the
right.
Houthis, I believe, kind of becoming pirates there, kind of
Mhm.
terrorizing a lot of ships, and Donald Trump like
Right.
had an attack on them. And so I think as a whole, I think this is going to be a lot better for supply chains once everything has been settled. But I think with this volatility of like what could be, a lot of people are more afraid uh, than are looking forward to what they can be gaining. And
Hmm.
so how I see it is like I'm more hopeful. I'm more hopeful in it, and I think Trump and Xi Jinping are more realistic, that they can see the signs. They're gonna have all the information. They're gonna recognize that they're gonna have to give a little bit at the same time, like to win.
Right. If we
And so
really
like yeah,
want, I think for the Philippines, I have to start thinking about this because I live in this country. And
let's go.
if we want to win alongside these other countries, if we want to be beneficiaries of this as well, there are several things that we need to do. The first thing that people really need to do is first they need to know what these people stand for economically. The second is they have to get rid of tariffs. Vote for people who would eliminate these tariffs. I mean, I know that people want to keep manufacturing in the Philippines. A lot of them think that we can be self-sufficient. You know what other country is self-sufficient? North Korea. North Korea is so self-sufficient. How are they doing economically? I'm going to tell you guys, not very well. If we rely on our own resources and put all these barriers for other companies to work here, we're not exactly favoring ourselves. We're just making it harder for our own people. And then the third is like this rule. There's just this one rule that says if you're going to have a business in the Philippines, it has to be Philippine owned, or a good chunk of it has to be Philippine owned.
Oh
It's like
wait, that rule is still in effect.
that's still in effect to this day. Any company that you see, there's some ownership of Filipinos in it, and it's the worst kind of it's
Well,
terrible because we need to grow and expand economically, and we can't do that if we keep preventing these companies who will make it better for us from coming in.
yeah, I think this is like a misunderstanding of like how investments kind of work. But it's funny because I believe Canada actually has the opposite problem, in which uh, too little Canadians own anything in Canada. There's more foreigners like own most of Canada in a way. But in the Philippines, like we're so focused on it has to be Filipino like made or a hand of Filipino there.
Yeah, but in,
Um,
like in Canada, if don't get me wrong, Canada's economy is doing so much more better, and even if they had the problem of these
oh yeah,
companies
yeah,
coming in, they could still. Nothing's gonna stop a family business or a business owner, a small business owner, from growing and expanding in the same way. You just have to compete with other competitors, but like you still have to work. There's a lot of Canadian business owners who develop really good businesses and then sell it to these big corporations.
yeah,
And for me, that's still giving an opportunity. We're not saying
exactly.
no to the
It's that
opportunity, but
opportunity.
Philippines is like
Well,
we're
I think,
denying Filipinos that.
I mean, the Philippines does have a new president, right? I think
Oh,
that
come on.
that could be one of the better, I guess, executive orders that he can do. I mean, what's going to happen, I think, is a lot of rich people from all over the world will look at the Philippines as a prime time to invest. Like this could be Hilton, or like, like when I think Philippines, I think about beaches. And so I think about like maybe resorts. They could invest more into Philippines to have that as more of like a prime location, and that's going to have a, a domino effect in every other areas, right? So there's
Right.
going to be like that particular, what is it, um, hotel and maintenance or something, like that kind of industry is going to be there, and then maybe like
We should be
fishing or
doing we should
snorkeling.
be doing medical tourism. Do you know what medical tourism is?
I'm not familiar. What's that?
Okay, so medical tourism is when you would, and Thailand is popular for this. You would go to another country to get treated, and you would have access to like this super
Oh,
high end medical treatment. You have you would have, what do you call this? You have like a boutique, the most premium kind of a suite. You have like a very nice room, and then you could still do tour. And at the same time, while you're waiting for this, you could also do tourism in the country. So what these other companies have been doing is, or countries is, you have countries like the Middle East, like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. The government would help subsidize and pay for these patients to get treatments in other countries, and then they also pay for like their flights, subsidize their flights and everything. And if you look up Bumrungrad was a really good hospital. And I'm thinking, why aren't we doing this in the Philippines? We have so many nurses and so many doctors, and they could all really be really, really good. We just need the infrastructure. And the thing that's been limiting it is that we don't have a lot of people with capital who could invest in the Philippines and really develop that industry. That could be something we're great for. And the other thing that I see the Philippines growing at, we have a lot of technicians here. We used to be, when the Philippines was like the hub for all these Asian countries, where all these countries would come in and learn technology, we were leading in developing semiconductors. The semiconductor or the microchip that allows us to have flat screens, that was developed by a Filipino. He is, if you look him up, his name is Dado Banato. He's
at least it
called the Philip.
rhymes.
Yeah, he's what is described as the Filipino Bill Gates. He invented the microchip that allows us to have smaller computers, or thinner computers rather, and flatter screens. And a lot of that innovation is happening in the Philippines. We should be having more of these companies building in the Philippines so we could help these workers come in and allow for more progress. The reason that the Philippines is in poverty is because we've had so many people who have good intentions. We have unrealistic expectations of what Filipinos should get out of their government, and no one thinks in an economy wide perspective. The people that I know who thinks of in an economy wide perspective, their opinions are not that popular because it would entail some sacrifice and some breaking of tradition and understanding of how the governments work and how industries work. The and we'll do an episode of that because we need to talk about what led the Philippines from becoming a first world country, or kind of like some functioning like a first world country, to a third world country. And it really all started when we started implementing those policies of what we thought was good, what we thought was for the best, and really they were just very harmful for people. And now we're struggling to grow, we're struggling to innovate, we're left on our own. We're close to becoming like North Korea. We're probably one of the only countries, third world countries, who wishes we practiced socialism. And people don't realize that. They want the democracy. They scream that they want a democracy, but the policies that they want to put in place are socialist policies, where everyone gets free healthcare, free education. No one thinks about who's going to hold the bag of crap at the end of it. There's always, it's either we deal with
Well,
that crap now or later.
that's really interesting how you kind of put it that way. I always saw it as like imagine if like imagine the flip side of it. Like we're talking about free healthcare. Well, like imagine you were a doctor that you got yourself, you studied really hard, and by the time you graduated and you became a doctor, let's say you worked a couple of years, now you have a majority of people telling you, forcing you that you have to treat them because of your profession.
Oh my, this is gonna
So
end well.
it's not just like it's that deeper level of thinking, really, to just kind of see it from both sides, where like okay, like who doesn't want free? But nothing like realistically, nothing comes for free. Like, and it's not like necessarily crap, but just it's more. Uh, Somebody is gonna be compelled to do something. You know, let's say these doctors, these nurses. Are you willing to compel them to work? And if they do not work, what happens? And the idea of it is
Ooh.
like, so with a government, they have to compel you with force at the end of the day. And realistically, the absolute force that they can do is like they will kill you if you don't. Or in a lot of the Western societies, the absolute worst is you'll be in jail or you'll be in prison. And
Hmm.
so, are you willing to take it to that level where doctors and nurses, or maybe you want like free electricity, so you need the technicians to work? Like, will you have to compel those people to do those services for free because like in the face of being in prison or killed?
We're not there yet. Well, I
I
would
mean,
argue
it's
that
just
we're
the
headed
idea
there.
of it.
Yeah,
Yes, and outside of that, then like growing up in that kind of society, would you sacrifice your time, talents, and abilities to become a doctor in that environment, or a nurse, or a technician, of anything,
all right.
if at the end of the day it's going to be compelled? And I think it's that idea that it sounds so good. A relative of mine is sick, and you know
We'd like them to get
so
treatment.
yes, and I think there's a lot of sympathy for that, and I think
Hmm.
like who doesn't want that? It's one of those things where sometimes we gotta realistically see if there's an actual enemy there.
You
Who
know,
doesn't actually want that? Like
I
realistically
think about
speaking.
this. Like you mention it, and there's actually one country who does provide free healthcare, very affordable healthcare, and even the rich people use this government subsidized healthcare system. You know what the country is?
I
It's
think Norway.
No, it's not Norway. It's actually Indonesia. Indonesia,
Hmm.
you know what they do? The government subsidizes their healthcare. That even the rich people, even if you're going through cancer treatments, and they won't delay that. In other places where they have free healthcare, you have to have a long waiting period.
Hmm.
For Indonesia, it's like even for a cancer treatment or for like a colonoscopy or something, it's like 6 months, like the
Mm.
most. And that's the maximum. Sometimes it's less than that. And then I ask some people, like, how do you guys do this? How is your government able to pay for the healthcare of all these people, that even rich people are utilizing it? Every person in Indonesia has access to that. Who's paying for it? and they're like, "Oh no, well, we're definitely in debt. We're definitely in loads and loads of debt, and it's all because of that." And so we look at these other countries. We keep looking at what's good. No one is asking if it works or not. And
Oh,
so
I think it's to summarize that it's don't like everybody wants to feel good, but no one really wants to do good. And so there's a lot of that feeling good of, everyone gets healthcare, but then realistically speaking, like how does that come to be? And it's like, well, to do that good, you have to do a lot of compelled work for a lot of people that, you know, by the you're going to compel them in one way or another, and it makes you really think if that's the best scenario.
oh gosh. But yeah, that's for another time. I'm hoping I'm just setting within my expectations. I don't think that will happen with this president.
I mean, how long are
In
the terms?
6 years. So we elected him in 2021, and so I've
I don't know.
probably around 2 years to go. No, he was in 2023. He was elected, so we've got a couple
So
more
there's still
years to
quite a
go.
few. I mean, that just makes me think. I mean, like, keep what has been working really well. I think the drug um,
Oh, that's gone. Like
fights.
the war on
Yeah,
drug.
yeah. I think you should keep that if less people have been taking it. And now, like, what's the next item? I feel like Duterte's like legacy is that. Now, I don't know this other guy, like what his legacy is going to be stamped on. Like he just needs
Uh,
to focus on 1 to 3 items that are actually a priority.
I'll show you like on another time because we're kind of running out. I'll show you in another time what he's actually implementing, and there's what he say he's doing, and then what he's actually doing, and I'll give you the gist of that. And I have to be very very careful because there are people there. Freedom of speech is not a thing in the Philippines anymore. We're
Oh,
coming to
really?
the point when we're about to jail and censor vloggers for what they say. And you know what?
Oh, I
I
totally
posted that.
forgot. Yeah. Oh, I
I
didn't see
posted.
it. But there was the nuisance streamers. There's a guy, Vitali, that was in the Philippines, and he was disturbing the peace,
He
and
was arrested for
he
it.
was
He was jailed
arrested.
for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good thing. I think. I think the
There's disturbing the peace. Like like if you there's disturbing the peace, but then jailing everyone because what you say without necessarily, you know, it, it, I can sympathize with causing harm or freedom of speech that enacts or causes harm, but like trying to speak out your own opinions and because the government doesn't like your opinion then jail you for that. That is something that we should be very very cautious about. I had relatives and people I know who say it's a good thing we get to censor what these bloggers are saying because sometimes what they say is stupid.
yeah,
And like maybe it is stupid, but if we give the government that power it's going to be hard to take that back.
yeah.
We
Well, I
really
mean,
are
part of it
becoming.
is who's to say what is hate speech? I think Great Britain
Exactly.
has this one
The
worse than the
extreme of it.
Philippines, and it's
Oh,
like it's the idea that you've sharing opinions in social media is equivalent to a hate crime, and once again the government has to compel you through prison or,
right.
or death, and in this case, like people will go in prison for 2 3 years for posting
Sheesh.
negative opinions. I think the Filipino people, like at the same time, it's not the United States. I feel like if the United States ever reaches that point, I mean, sayonara,
So
first First Amendment, but
you
like,
guys have the privilege of the Second Amendment, to protect you from that.
yeah, I mean, thank God for the founding fathers. But I mean, the Philippines is also it's a different country, right? So like maybe different scenarios requires different rules. I mean, the war on drugs, I think, greatly helped greatly helped the Philippines, and so mm, I don't see how this is gonna help, but maybe I highly disagree with it, but I'm trying to see a positive light somehow that maybe this is what is potentially necessary. I actually I still don't see it. I can't defend this. I think
Yeah,
that's the
it
first
takes
step
a
to
lot.
fascism.
Well, something we'll have to do. Well, that's all for me on the pod. We'll see all you guys next week.
Yeah, ciao.